In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. We have a wonderful and joyous feast today, of course. But where to begin? When you contemplate all of the saints in glory in heaven. I find it helpful to picture them in their hierarchy not so much in a linear level, but in a three-dimensional level, like a giant sphere all surrounding God. What do I mean by that? Why a sphere? Why in 3 dimensions? Because the greatness of God, the magnificence of God is communicated to a certain degree by the variety that He has put into creation, both in the things of the earth and in men, and in the virtues that He has pulled out of His saints. Take the things of the earth, the fruits of the land. God could have just made one fruit, just one kind of apple, or just one kind of orange, or something like that, and, that would have been very boring. But instead, He makes all of these fruits, and they all have sort of a different place, and that's why, we say, you can't compare apples and oranges, because they're good for different things, and they can both be excellent in their own kind, and not necessarily in competition, or the competition doesn't work. Or take even things of the same species, like cherries. You have pie cherries, and you have table cherries. Well, sweet cherries, sweet cherries are great, but you don't want to make a pie out of them. And also, you don't want to eat pie cherries off the tree, unless you're a raccoon and you like that kind of thing. But typically, we have these 2 kinds of things that they each have their own different focus. They have a different flavor, they're good for different things, and they can each be perfect, without blemish, and arrayed around God to show His magnificence and His glory in 2 different places, right? So that's why you look at it like a sphere, because the saints are the same way. Saints are the same way. Saints are not in competition. Every saint occupies his perfect place in that great sphere around God, some closer, some further. But if we think about them as in this kind of sphere, having that special relationship that comes from this particular virtue, maybe, that they were excellent in. You have one saint over here who's excellent in the virtue of humility. Then another saint over here is excellent in the virtue of courage. And so they aren't in competition with each other. They're perfectly ordered together. And that's what we see when we look at the heavenly sphere, when we look at the heavenly court. All the saints is that they are excellent in their virtues, in their particular virtues, in all of their virtues, but that they all fit together without any competition, and, I would say too, without really any unnecessary overlap. That God has made it so that no 2 people are alike, similarly with the saints. That no saint exactly overlaps with another saint, as to make one sort of redundant or useless. That every saint fits into that perfect order, which has the effect of showing forth the great glory of God. What does this have to mean for us? We should take this order, this heavenly order, as an inspiration to meditate on 2 things. To meditate, especially if we're discerning this, on our vocation, and then on how we live our vocation. We want to meditate, where do we fit? What virtues in our history, what things has God given us that He hasn't given to others? Trials, maybe. What has He done? How is He shaping us? What place is He trying to put us in over there? And then finally, when we found that, or found that as best we can, it matters greatly that we live out our lives in this order, in this right order, so that we pursue our vocation and not someone else's vocation. The Franciscan who tries to be a Dominican will not be a good Dominican, and he won't be a good Franciscan. The diocesan priest who tries to be a Carthusian will be a bad diocesan priest and a bad Carthusian. Similarly, those in the married state try to be an anchoress or an anchorite will not be a very good husband or wife, and so on. We cannot pursue our vocation by trampling on someone else's, by trying to pursue someone else's. We must pursue our own. And even within our own, the living out of that vocation, It's where we see the great importance of keeping our lives rightly ordered. And I don't mean necessarily rightly ordered as that sense of avoiding sin. We take that for granted. Think of it like this. I was at a dinner recently, and on this table, fancy dinner, on the table, they had these little glass cups, and in the cups were tea candles. But a couple of the tea candles weren't exactly level. They were crooked. And I'm watching them throughout the dinner, and watching to see what happens, right? So the point of that little tinfoil thing is to keep the wax around the candle so it can burn all the wax up. That way if it's off, if it's a little disordered, it's a little crooked, and a couple things happen. The flame rises because there's more of the wick that's exposed to the air, and the wax dribbles out the side. And then, because it's destabled, the wick goes down into the wax that is there, and it's extinguished, and it's a waste. Now, in some places that I have been, spend your time exhorting people to be caught on fire. Or, if they are on fire, you spend your time exhorting them to develop that reservoir, develop those skills, that wax that they can consume, those good works. What can they do? How do they live this life? But when we have people that are on fire with divine charity, and that have the vocation, that have this material to consume, the acts of their life to consume, well, it is still another thing to make sure that our lives are ordered properly. If they're disordered, even if we have these good things, we're on fire, we have that wax, if we let it become disordered, then it all spills out. That we flame out and we, what is that expression? Anyway, bad things result. Burn out. Then the wick burns out, right? And we see this in our own lives when we overstep our bounds in right order. Overstep our bounds. Now, there are some times, of course, in times of emergency, to prevent great catastrophe, or when there's a grave situation, and if we can, to determine this, we should take it under advisement. When we do have to sort of step outside of our order and take over the job of someone else to make sure that a catastrophe doesn't happen. But for the most part, when we see someone else maybe not living up to his vocation perfectly, the response should not be to try and take over that vocation or take over that job, because that introduces disorder and disharmony, the very thing we're trying to accomplish, the very thing we're hoping to restore. Think about people at work. If you have somebody who doesn't do his job perfectly, the answer isn't to jump in there and start doing his job for him, because that will just disorder your life and disorder the organization. Creates that imbalance that disturbs that order of things. So in our lives, we should always be looking towards heaven for our goals in life, to order our lives in accord with God's heavenly plan. We hope that we may one day too join in some way, little or small, or great or small, in that heavenly chorus that is arrayed completely around God. That we take our place, not trampling on the vocation of others, or trying to be something that we're not, but fully embracing with great humility that state in life that God has called us to, that God has planned for us. That He wants us to reach our perfection by being this particular thing over here, this particular kind of fruit. He wants us to be this over here, not that over there. And it takes great humility to recognize that and to embrace that. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.